The transport ship Celestial Dawn drifted through the void toward the massive structure that housed the Galactic Military Academy. Commander pressed her face against the porthole, watching as the kilometer-long station grew larger. Its sleek alien architecture gleamed under the light of 3 distant suns, a testament to the advanced civilizations that had built it centuries before humanity even discovered fire. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked Lieutenant, settling into the seat beside her. His voice carried the same mixture of awe and nervousness that felt churning in her stomach. "First time seeing anything this big," admitted. "Back on Earth, our largest space stations could fit in one of those docking bays." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Here they were, representatives of the species to join the Galactic Federation, heading to an institution that had trained warriors from dozens of advanced civilizations. Humanity had been discovered only 5 years ago by an exploration vessel, and their rapid acceptance into the Federation had surprised everyone, including themselves. The docking procedure took an hour, during which reviewed her assignment orders for the 100th time. She was to serve as a tactical instructor at the Academy, teaching combat theory and strategy to cadets from across the galaxy. The appointment had come as a shock to the entire human military hierarchy. Species typically needed centuries of Federation membership before their officers were invited to teach at the Academy. "Attention passengers," came the announcement in perfect Federation standard. "We have successfully docked with Galactic Military Academy Station Omega-7. Please proceed to Disembarkation Bay 3 for processing." Gathered her belongings, which consisted of a single duffel bag containing her personal effects and a secure data pad with classified Earth military files. The Federation had specifically requested detailed accounts of human warfare, though they'd been vague about why. The disembarkation bay was enormous, easily 3 times the size of any hangar had ever seen. Dozens of species moved about in organized chaos, their various physiologies creating a living tapestry of galactic diversity. She spotted the towering, crystalline with their translucent skin, the 6-armed scuttling about on their multiple legs, and the ethereal floating just above the ground in their environmental suits. "Commander," a voice called out in accented Federation standard, turned to see a bipedal reptilian approaching. The creature stood about 2 meters tall, with green scales that shimmered under the station's lighting and intelligent golden eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "That's me," replied, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting she'd been told was universally understood. The alien studied her hand for a moment before carefully grasping it with his own clawed appendage. "I am Colonel of the Saurian Hegemony. I will be your liaison during your orientation period." As they walked through the station's corridors, provided a running commentary on the Academy's history and structure. The Academy was established 700 standard years ago by the founding members of the Federation. It serves as the primary training facility for officers who will command mixed-species forces. The corridors were wide enough to accommodate the largest Federation species, with multiple levels of walkways for those who preferred different heights. The architecture was simultaneously alien and functional, with flowing curves that seemed to bend light itself. "How many species are represented here?" asked, dodging a group of floating jellyfish-like beings that pulsed with bioluminescent communication patterns. "Currently, 47 distinct species maintain permanent instructional staff," replied. "Though we regularly host visiting lecturers from another dozen worlds, you humans are quite unique in that regard." "How so?" His head tilted in what was learning to recognize as the reptilian equivalent of a thoughtful pause. "Most species require extensive observation periods before they're invited to contribute to the Academy's curriculum. Your species was fast-tracked through the process in a matter of months." They arrived at a vast amphitheater where the orientation session was about to begin. Took her assigned seat among dozens of other new instructors, noting that she was the only human present. The stage featured a holographic display that could accommodate visual learners from all species, while auditory and chemical communication methods were transmitted directly to those who required them. Admiral, with the typical blue-gray skin and 4 arms of his species, began the orientation. His voice was translated in real time for the various species present. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. You have been selected to train the next generation of Federation officers based on your species' unique contributions to military science and tactics." The presentation covered the Academy's mission, structure, and expectations. Learned that she would be teaching a course called Asymmetric Warfare and Tactical Adaptation to senior cadets who were preparing for their final evaluations. Each instructor brings the wisdom of their civilization's military evolution, Admiral continued. The emphasis on technological superiority, the Saurian mastery of defensive strategies, the expertise in swarm tactics, and now, the human approach to warfare. After the general orientation, was escorted to a smaller briefing room where she met with the Academy's curriculum committee. The room contained representatives from 8 different species, each specializing in different aspects of military education. "Commander," began Doctor, whose multiple eyes tracked different movements simultaneously, "your assignment is somewhat irregular. Typically, new instructors begin with basic courses in military history or logistics. However, your species' military records have generated considerable interest among our strategic planning committee." Professor, a tall, graceful being from the ethereal collective, leaned forward. Her translator rendered her melodic communication into standard. "We have reviewed the historical data your government provided. Your species' approach to warfare is unprecedented in our experience." Felt a chill run down her spine. "In what way?" "Your casualty rates," Admiral said bluntly. "Both inflicted and sustained. In your species' major conflicts, the numbers are unlike anything in our recorded history." Doctor manipulated a holographic display, showing comparative data from various galactic conflicts. In the typical Federation military engagement, casualty rates rarely exceed single-digit percentages. Even in the most intense battles recorded in our databases, losses of 10 to 15% are considered catastrophic. "Your World War II," Professor continued, "lasted 6 standard years and resulted in the deaths of over 70 million beings. Your American Civil War claimed more lives in 4 years than most galactic civilizations have lost in their entire recorded military histories." Stared at the holographic displays showing battle statistics from human history. The numbers, when compared to galactic standards, painted humanity in a disturbing light. "Are you saying we're more violent than other species?" "Not exactly," Admiral replied. "Violence exists throughout the galaxy. What's unique about humans is your species' willingness to sustain massive losses while continuing to fight. Most civilizations reach a point where self-preservation instincts overwhelm military objectives. Humans seem to possess an unusual capacity for prolonged, high-intensity warfare." The committee members exchanged glances that couldn't interpret across species barriers, but the tension in the room was palpable. "There's another factor," Doctor added, his multiple arms gesturing at additional data displays. "Your technological advancement during periods of conflict. Most species develop military technology gradually over centuries. Humans appear to make quantum leaps during times of war. Nuclear weapons, jet aircraft, radar, computers, all developed or significantly advanced during your conflicts." Professor's translator conveyed what sounded like amazement mixed with concern. "In 4 years of your Second World War, humans went from propeller-driven aircraft to jet fighters, from basic radio communication to radar systems, from conventional explosives to nuclear weapons. This rate of advancement during conflict is unprecedented." "Which brings us to your assignment," Admiral said. "We want you to teach our senior cadets how to think like humans in warfare, how to maintain fighting capability under extreme losses, how to adapt and innovate under pressure, and how to sustain long-term conflicts." Felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "You want me to teach alien cadets how to fight like humans?" "We want you to teach them how to survive fighting against humans," Doctor corrected. "Recent intelligence suggests that not all human factions are as peaceful as your Federation representatives. There are indications of isolated human colonies that may not share your government's diplomatic intentions." The room fell silent as the implications sank in, realized that her appointment wasn't about sharing military knowledge for the common good. It was about preparing the galaxy for the possibility of human aggression. "What kind of intelligence?" asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. Admiral activated a new holographic display showing star charts with highlighted systems. "Long-range scouts have detected signs of human activity in several uncharted systems beyond your official colonial boundaries. These settlements appear to be militarized, and have been unresponsive to Federation contact attempts. Some of these colonies appear to be developing technologies that exceed even your home world's capabilities, Professor added. We believe they may be human military units that were lost during your expansion period and have continued developing independently. Studied the star chart, noting the distances involved. Some of the marked systems were hundreds of light years from Earth's known colonies. How long have they been out there? Based on stellar drift patterns and technological signatures, we estimate some of these settlements are at least 50 to 100 standard years old, Doctor replied. Old enough to have developed their own military doctrines, possibly without the diplomatic restraints that govern your Federation membership. The implications were staggering. Human military units, isolated for generations, developing technology and tactics without any oversight or diplomatic pressure. Could only imagine what such groups might have become after decades of independent development. Your job, Admiral continued, is to prepare our officers for the possibility of conflict with these rogue human elements. We need them to understand human tactical thinking, human innovation under pressure, and most importantly, human persistence in warfare. Was assigned quarters in the Academy's residential sector, a comfortable suite that had been modified for human physiological needs. As she unpacked her belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being used as a weapon against her own species. Her first class was scheduled for the following morning. She spent the evening reviewing the cadet roster and was surprised by the diversity of species represented. Saurians and dozens of others, all senior cadets preparing for command positions in the Federation military. The next morning stood before her first class in a state-of-the-art tactical simulation chamber. The 37 cadets represented 23 different species, their various physiologies creating a rainbow of forms and sizes throughout the amphitheater-style seating. I am commander of the Terran Federation, she began, her voice translated in real time for the various species present. I've been assigned to teach you about human approaches to warfare. Before we begin, I want you to understand something important. What you're about to learn isn't just academic theory. It's how my species thinks, fights, and survives. A cadet raised one of his forearms. Commander, our preliminary studies suggest that humans suffer disproportionately high casualty rates in conflicts. Why would we want to emulate such inefficient tactics? Smiled grimly. Because those inefficient tactics have allowed humans to survive and thrive despite being one of the youngest spacefaring species in known history. Our high casualty rates come with correspondingly high enemy casualty rates. She activated the holographic display, showing a map of Earth during World War II. Let me tell you about a battle called Stalingrad. 2 human military forces fought for control of a single city for 5 months. By the end of the battle, over 2 million soldiers and civilians were dead or wounded. The class stirred uneasily as the numbers appeared on the display. Continued, most galactic civilizations would have abandoned the city after the first week of such casualties. Humans fought for every building, every room, every staircase. The defending force was willing to see their entire city destroyed rather than surrender it. A Saurian cadet spoke up. Such destruction serves no tactical purpose. A destroyed city has no strategic value. That's where you're wrong, replied. The city's destruction served a crucial purpose. It demonstrated to the attacking force that humans would rather die than surrender. It forced the enemy to commit massive resources to capture worthless rubble. Most importantly, it bought time for other human forces to prepare counterattacks. She changed the holographic display to show casualty statistics from various human conflicts. What you're seeing isn't inefficiency. It's a fundamental difference in how humans approach warfare. Most species fight to win while minimizing losses. Humans fight to win regardless of losses. The class fell silent as they absorbed this information, could see the unease on their various faces and expression equivalents. For your first exercise, announced, you're going to plan the defense of a Federation colony against an attacking force 3 times your size. Standard tactical doctrine calls for evacuation or surrender when facing such odds. I want you to plan a defense assuming that retreat and surrender are not options. As the cadets began working on their tactical scenarios, realized that she was fundamentally changing how these future officers thought about warfare. The question that haunted her was whether she was preparing them to defend against rogue humans or training them to become more like humans themselves. The implications of either possibility were equally disturbing. 3 weeks into her teaching assignment, had settled into a routine that felt both familiar and alien. Her morning briefings with the Academy's tactical committee had become increasingly intense as reports continued to arrive about the mysterious human colonies. The evidence suggested these settlements weren't just militarized. They were actively expanding and had developed technologies that concerned even the most advanced Federation species. His classroom had been modified with advanced holographic projectors capable of creating full-immersion battle simulations. Today's lesson would push her cadets further into human tactical thinking than any previous session. She stood at the center of the chamber as 37 alien minds focused on her with varying degrees of attention and skepticism. Today we're going to discuss something that most galactic civilizations consider a war crime, announced, watching as translator matrices worked overtime to convey the concept across species barriers. Total warfare. Cadet Ra, whose compound eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously, spoke up. Commander, the Federation War Crimes Treaty specifically prohibits targeting civilian populations and infrastructure. And that treaty works well when both sides agree to follow it, replied. But what happens when you face an enemy who doesn't recognize your rules of engagement? She activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of a Federation border world. The simulated planet rotated slowly, showing cities, industrial centers, and military installations clearly marked in different colors. This is 442b, a Federation agricultural world with a population of 12 million. Your sensor readings indicate an attacking force of unknown composition approaching the system. Long-range communications have been severed. Your orders are to defend the planet using any means necessary. Cadet, a crystalline whose internal light patterns indicated deep concentration, asked, "What are the constraints on our defensive options?" "There are none," said simply. "That's the point of this exercise. You're going to learn to think like humans when everything else has failed." The cadets exchanged glances across species lines, their various methods of non-verbal communication creating a complex web of uncertainty throughout the room. They had been trained to fight according to galactic conventions that emphasized minimal collateral damage and preservation of civilian life, was about to teach them to think beyond those limitations. "Computer, initialize scenario Omega-7, commanded. The holographic environment transformed into a detailed tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. "You have 6 hours before the attack begins. Standard Federation doctrine calls for evacuation of civilians and preparation of defensive positions around military targets." The cadets immediately began analyzing the scenario using their traditional training. Watched as they developed evacuation plans, calculated defensive firing positions, and organized supply lines that prioritized civilian safety above tactical advantage. Cadet addressed a young Saurian who had been designated as scenario commander. "Present your defensive strategy." The reptilian cadet stood, his scales shifting to a confident green coloration. "We will evacuate all civilian population centers to the southern continent, establish defensive perimeters around our 3 main military installations, and position our fleet assets to create overlapping fields of fire in the orbital approaches." "Timeline for evacuation?" asked. 14 hours for complete civilian evacuation, assuming cooperation from local authorities." Nodded. "Computer, advanced scenario to attack commencement." The holographic display shifted, showing enemy forces entering the system's outer perimeter. "The attacking fleet has arrived 4 hours early. Your evacuation is 60% complete. What do you do now?" The cadets scrambled to adjust their plans, but could see the panic in their various expressions. They had been trained to fight clean wars with predictable timelines and cooperative enemies. "Time compression is now active," announced. "Make your decisions quickly." Cadets' scales shifted to an alarmed yellow. "We continue evacuation while our fleet engages the enemy in the outer system." "Computer, implement cadets' strategy." The holographic display showed the Federation fleet moving to intercept, while evacuation transports continued their runs to the planet's surface. Within minutes, the simulation showed the Federation forces being overwhelmed by superior numbers. Enemy ships broke through the defensive line and began approaching the planet. "Your fleet is destroyed," announced. The enemy has orbital supremacy. 5 million civilians are still on the planet. What do you do now? The class fell silent. According to their training, the scenario was over. Without fleet support and with civilians present, surrender was the only option that preserved life. "We surrender," Cadet said quietly, his scales now a defeated gray. "Computer, implement surrender." The holographic display showed Federation forces laying down their weapons. Then it showed something that made the entire class recoil. Enemy forces began systematically destroying cities, regardless of whether they had been defended or not. The civilian death toll climbed into the millions. "Your surrender saved no one," said grimly. "The enemy wasn't interested in conquest. They wanted extermination. Now let me show you how humans would have fought this battle." Reset the scenario to the beginning. "Computer, implement tactical doctrine designation, Sherman's March." The display shifted to show a radically different defensive strategy. Instead of trying to protect civilian centers, human forces were using the cities themselves as weapons. "The first thing humans would recognize is that traditional defensive strategy assumes your enemy shares your values," explained. "When facing an enemy committed to total destruction, humans respond with total warfare." The simulation showed human forces converting civilian infrastructure into military assets. Factories became weapons production centers, schools became training facilities, and hospitals became fortified command posts. Most shocking to the alien cadets, civilian populations weren't evacuated. They were armed. 12 million civilians become 12 million potential combatants, continued. Every building becomes a fortress, every street becomes a killing field, every resource becomes a weapon. Cadet Raw's multiple eyes tracked the simulation data streams in obvious distress. "Commander, this strategy guarantees massive civilian casualties." "Yes, it does," agreed. "It also guarantees massive enemy casualties. Watch what happens when the attack begins." The simulation showed the enemy fleet encountering not a traditional defensive formation, but a planet that had transformed itself into a weapon. Every landing zone was trapped, every approach vector was mined, and every successful landing led to urban warfare against an entire population that refused to surrender. The holographic display tracked casualty numbers that climbed horrifyingly on both sides. But as the simulation progressed, something became clear to the watching cadets. The attacking force was taking far heavier losses than in the previous scenario, and their advance had slowed to a crawl. "After 6 months of fighting," announced, "the enemy force is reduced to 40% effectiveness and has captured only 30% of the planet. Meanwhile, human forces continue to adapt, innovate, and increase their lethality." The simulation showed human defenders developing new weapons from civilian materials, creating increasingly sophisticated traps, and coordinating resistance activities across the entire planet. Most disturbing to the cadets, the human casualty rate had actually decreased over time as the population learned to fight more effectively. "Computer, project scenario outcome based on current trends." The holographic display showed probability matrices that made the entire class shift uneasily. The human forces were projected to achieve victory within 18 months, despite starting from a position of complete tactical disadvantage. "How is this possible?" asked Cadet, whose environmental suit couldn't hide the agitation in their movements. "Because humans don't think of warfare as a game with rules," explained. "When survival is at stake, every human becomes a weapon, every resource becomes ammunition, and every loss becomes motivation to fight harder." Brought up a new display showing historical human conflicts. During the siege of Leningrad, humans survived 900 days of encirclement. They ate wallpaper, paste, leather, and eventually each other. But they never surrendered. When the siege was broken, the city still belonged to the defenders. The class stared at the historical data with a mixture of fascination and horror. These weren't just tactical scenarios to them anymore. This was insight into the minds of beings who thought about warfare in fundamentally alien ways. "But what about the ethical implications?" asked Cadet, her crystalline structure flickering with agitated light patterns. "Surely humans recognize the moral cost of such tactics." Paused, considering her response carefully. "Humans have extensive ethical frameworks governing warfare, but those frameworks include a concept that most galactic civilizations don't share: the idea that some things are worse than death." She changed the display to show Earth's World War II. When humans faced an enemy committed to their extermination, they developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. They used those weapons because they calculated that ending the war quickly would save more lives than prolonging it. The mathematics of nuclear warfare appeared on the holographic display, showing projected casualty rates for both nuclear strikes and conventional invasion of Japan. The numbers were staggering, but the logic was undeniable from a human perspective. 200,000 died in nuclear attacks, continued. But military analysts projected that conventional invasion would have cost over 1 million Allied casualties and potentially 5 million Japanese casualties. Humans chose the option that minimized total death, even though it required them to cross an unprecedented moral line. Cadet's scales had shifted to a contemplative blue. You're saying humans calculate acceptable losses differently than other species. I'm saying humans are willing to accept any loss if the alternative is extinction, corrected. Most species have limits on what they'll sacrifice for victory. Humans don't. She activated a new simulation showing a human colony under attack by overwhelming forces. The scenario was designed to test everything the cadets had learned about human tactical thinking. Your assignment for tomorrow is to defend this colony using human tactical doctrine, announced. I want you to think like humans. What would you sacrifice? What lines would you cross? How far would you go to ensure victory? As the cadets filed out of the classroom, their various expressions of unease were unmistakable across species lines. Remained behind, staring at the holographic display that still showed casualty projections from the day's scenarios. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral's image appeared on the small screen, his 4 arms gesturing with obvious agitation. Commander, we need to discuss recent developments. Report to Briefing Room 7 immediately. Made her way through the Academy's corridors, noting increased security presence and the tense atmosphere among staff members. Something had changed, and she had a growing suspicion that it involved the mysterious human colonies. Briefing Room 7 was packed with senior Academy staff and Federation military officials. Recognized representatives from every major species, their various methods of displaying concern creating an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. Admiral activated a holographic display showing real-time intelligence data. 3 hours ago, Federation long-range sensors detected this. The display showed a massive structure in deep space, clearly artificial and unmistakably of human design. But the scale was unprecedented, easily 10 times larger than anything Earth had ever built. The structure is located in the Perseus Arm, approximately 300 light-years from known human space, Admiral continued. Preliminary scans indicate it's not just a space station. It appears to be a shipyard capable of constructing vessels larger than anything in our current fleet. Doctor manipulated additional data streams with his multiple arms. Energy signatures suggest the facility has been operational for at least 20 standard years. Conservative estimates indicate it could have produced dozens of capital ships during that time period. Professor's translator conveyed alarm that needed no interpretation. Most disturbing is the technological sophistication. The construction materials and energy systems exceed anything your Earth government has shared with the Federation. Stared at the data, feeling a chill run down her spine. You're saying these rogue human colonies have surpassed Earth technologically? We're saying they may have surpassed everyone technologically, Admiral replied grimly. And yesterday we received this transmission. The holographic display shifted to show a communication from the mysterious facility. A human figure appeared, wearing a uniform didn't recognize. The man's face was, his eyes hard with decades of conflict. To the so-called Galactic Federation, the figure began, his voice carrying authority and threat in equal measure. You have harbored our traitorous for 5 years while they spread lies about human nature and intentions. This ends now. The message continued with details that made blood run cold. These weren't just isolated human colonies. They were the survivors of Earth's early expansion efforts, military units that had been presumed lost during humanity's first attempts at interstellar colonization. We are the true inheritors of human destiny, the man continued. We have spent 50 years forging ourselves into something our weak could never imagine. We have conquered 17 systems, absorbed or eliminated 43 alien species, and developed weapons that make your Federation fleets obsolete. The transmission ended with coordinates and a timeline. The rogue humans were demanding Earth's expulsion from the Federation and threatening war if their demands weren't met. Admiral deactivated the display. Commander, your assessment of human warfare capabilities has suddenly become much more than academic. These rogue humans appear to have developed into exactly what we feared, a military force that thinks like humans but lacks diplomatic restraints. Realized that her role at the academy had fundamentally changed. She was no longer just teaching alien cadets about human tactics. She was preparing them for a war that might determine the survival of galactic civilization. "How long do we have?" she asked. 6 months, Admiral replied. "That's when their ultimatum expires. After that, we face the possibility of fighting the most dangerous enemy the galaxy has ever known, humans who have had 50 years to perfect the art of warfare without restraint." The weight of responsibility settled on shoulders like a crushing burden. The galaxy was about to learn firsthand what humans were truly capable of when they stopped holding back. The Academy had transformed into a fortress of desperate preparation over the past 5 months. Walked through corridors now lined with tactical displays showing defensive positions throughout Federation space. The atmosphere was thick with tension as dozens of species worked together with unprecedented urgency, all united by the terrifying prospect of facing humanity's darkest evolution. This classroom had become the most popular venue in the entire academy. What had started as lessons for 37 senior cadets had expanded to include officers, admirals, and strategic planners from every major Federation species. Today's session would be her last before the deadline expired, and everyone knew it might determine whether galactic civilization survived the coming storm. "The final lesson," announced to the packed amphitheater, "is about something my species calls total commitment. You've learned about human tactics, human innovation under pressure, and human persistence in warfare, but you haven't yet understood what makes humans truly dangerous." Admiral had taken a seat in the front row. His 4 arms folded in what had learned was the expression of deep concentration. Around him, representatives of 47 species focused on her words with the intensity of beings who knew their survival might depend on understanding. "Computer, load scenario designation, last stand protocol," commanded. The holographic environment around them transformed into a detailed representation of Federation space, with known human colony positions marked in ominous red. "Based on our intelligence, the rogue human forces possess approximately 200 ships of unknown capability, control 17 star systems, and have access to technologies that exceed anything in the Federation database," continued. "Standard tactical analysis suggests that Federation forces are outmatched in every measurable category." Murmurs of unease rippled through the audience in dozens of different languages and communication methods. Let the reality sink in before continuing. "But humans don't measure victory the same way other species do. When facing extinction, humans don't calculate acceptable losses. They calculate acceptable sacrifices." She activated a new display showing Earth's history during its most desperate conflicts. "When I faced potential invasion during World War II, human governments developed contingency plans that would have made the planet uninhabitable rather than allow enemy occupation." The holographic display showed classified documents from various human governments, detailing scorched Earth policies that would have destroyed entire continents if invasion seemed inevitable. The Soviet Union prepared to destroy every oil well, every factory, every bridge, and every farm in their territory rather than let them fall into enemy hands, explained. Britain developed plans to flood their own coal mines, burn their own cities, and poison their own water supplies if German invasion succeeded. Doctors' multiple eyes tracked the data streams with obvious distress. Such tactics would render the territory worthless to any occupying force. "Exactly," agreed. "Humans will destroy what they love to prevent their enemies from claiming it, but that's not the most dangerous aspect of human warfare. The most dangerous aspect is what happens when humans stop fighting to win and start fighting to take their enemies with them." She changed the display to show theoretical battle scenarios. "Computer, model a human force facing certain defeat with no possibility of retreat or reinforcement." The simulation showed human forces in an impossible tactical situation, surrounded and outnumbered 10 to 1. Traditional doctrine from any galactic species would call for surrender to preserve life. Instead, the simulation showed human forces reorganizing into what called maximum damage configuration. When humans accept that they're going to die, they focus entirely on making that death as costly as possible for their enemies, explained. Ships become guided missiles, soldiers become walking bombs, and every resource becomes a weapon designed to inflict maximum damage before destruction. The simulation showed human defenders converting their own infrastructure into improvised weapons, using civilian technology to create devastating traps, and organizing attacks that guaranteed their own destruction, but inflicted catastrophic losses on attackers. The human concept of Pyrrhic victory assumes that winning at too high a cost is equivalent to losing, continued. But humans can invert that logic. They can make victory so costly for their enemies that defeat becomes a form of triumph. Cadet Ra, now promoted to Federation Tactical Analyst, spoke up from the audience. Commander, are you suggesting that the rogue human forces might choose mutual destruction over defeat? I'm suggesting that they might see mutual destruction as their preferred victory condition, corrected. If these rogue humans have spent 50 years developing their military capabilities without diplomatic restraints, they may have evolved beyond the point where survival matters more than dominance. Admiral stood, his scales shifting to the deep blue that indicated serious concern. Commander, based on your analysis, what would you recommend as our primary strategic objective? Paused, knowing that her answer would influence how the entire Federation approached the coming conflict. Don't try to defeat them militarily. That's not possible with the forces we have available. Shocked silence filled the amphitheater. For months, Federation strategists had been planning defensive strategies based on the assumption that military victory was achievable with sufficient preparation. Instead, continued, force them to remember what they used to be. She activated a new display showing detailed analysis of the rogue human transmission from months earlier. The man who delivered their ultimatum was angry, not coldly calculating, not strategically focused, angry. That anger suggests emotional investment that pure military logic wouldn't require. Highlighted specific phrases from the transmission. He called Earth traitorous and accused the Federation of harboring weakness. This isn't the language of a species that has transcended human emotional responses. This is the language of humans who feel betrayed. Doctor manipulated data streams to show psychological profiles of the rogue human leadership. You believe their military superiority is motivated by emotional rather than strategic factors. I believe they've convinced themselves that they represent the true human spirit while Earth has become weak through diplomacy, replied. That kind of ideological commitment can be their greatest strength or their greatest weakness. She changed the display to show a proposed battle strategy that made the entire audience shift uncomfortably. Instead of trying to match the rogue humans militarily, the plan called for forcing them to confront the reality of what they had become. Computer, model scenario designation, mirror protocol, commanded. The holographic environment shifted to show a detailed battle plan, unlike anything the Academy had ever taught. The key to fighting humans isn't matching their military capabilities, explained. It's forcing them to see themselves clearly. These rogue humans have spent 50 years telling themselves they're the true inheritors of human nature. What happens when they're confronted with evidence that they've become something humanity would reject? The simulation showed Federation forces implementing a strategy that seemed almost suicidal. Instead of fighting to win, they would fight to demonstrate exactly what the rogue humans had lost during their decades of isolated military development. Phase 1 involves evacuating civilian populations from target worlds not to safety, but to Earth, continued. 47 different species, millions of individuals, all seeking shelter on humanities. Force the rogue humans to attack a planet that represents everything they claim to despise about human weakness. Admiral's scales shifted to an alarmed yellow. Commander, you're suggesting we use Earth as bait. I'm suggesting we use Earth as a symbol, corrected. These rogue humans don't want to conquer territory. They want to prove that their vision of humanity is correct. Force them to attack a world where their own species has chosen to protect alien refugees instead of pursuing military dominance. The simulation showed the psychological impact of such a strategy. Rogue human forces would face a choice between attacking their or accepting that their ideology might be flawed. Phase 2 involves demonstrating that human military effectiveness doesn't require abandoning human values, continued. Every Federation species contributes their best tactical innovations, while human forces coordinate overall strategy. Show the rogue humans that cooperation can achieve what isolation cannot. Professor's translator conveyed thoughtful interest. You believe superior tactics can compensate for inferior technology. I believe superior motivation can compensate for inferior everything, replied. These rogue humans are fighting for an idea. We need to give Federation forces something more powerful to fight for. She activated the final phase of her proposed strategy. Phase 3 is the most important. When the battle is joined, we don't try to minimize our casualties. We demonstrate that Federation species are willing to die defending human civilians, just as humans are willing to die defending alien refugees. The holographic display showed battle scenarios where Federation forces absorbed massive losses while protecting Earth and its mixed population. The casualty projections were staggering, but the psychological impact on rogue human forces was potentially decisive. These rogue humans have spent 50 years believing that strength requires abandoning compassion, explained. Show them a galaxy where strength and compassion are inseparable, and you force them to question everything they've built their identity on. Admiral studied the battle projections with obvious concern. Commander, your strategy assumes the rogue humans retain enough of their original humanity to be influenced by such demonstrations. It's the only assumption that offers hope, replied honestly. If they've truly transcended human emotional responses, then we're all dead anyway. But if they're still human underneath all that military evolution, then they can still remember what humanity used to mean. As the session ended, remained in the empty amphitheater, staring at the holographic displays that showed projected casualty figures in the millions. Her strategy required sacrifices that would make the bloodiest human conflicts look restrained by comparison. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming transmission from Earth. Her sister's face appeared on the small screen, older than remembered but still recognizably family. Sarah, we're seeing massive refugee movements toward Earth, her sister said without preamble. Millions of aliens arriving every day. The government says it's temporary, but people are scared. What's really happening out there? Looked at her sister's face and realized she was seeing what the rogue humans had lost. The capacity for concern about strangers, the willingness to help despite fear, the fundamentally human impulse to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. We're about to find out what kind of species we really are, replied. And the whole galaxy is going to learn whether humanity's future lies in what we've become or what we used to be. The transmission ended, leaving alone with the weight of what she had set in motion. In 72 hours, the rogue human ultimatum would expire. In 73 hours, the galaxy would discover whether the kill count instructor had taught her students how to survive against humanity's darkest evolution. The final test was about to begin, and the stakes were nothing less than the survival of everything both versions of humanity claimed to represent. In the end, only one vision of human nature would survive the coming war, and it helped ensure that the battle would be fought not just with weapons and tactics, but with the fundamental question of what it truly meant to be human. As she walked through the academy's corridors one last time, past her former students preparing for deployments that would take them across the galaxy. Each of them now understood human warfare not as an academic subject, but as a terrifying reality they would soon face. The kill count instructor had done her job. Whether that job would save galactic civilization or doom, it remained to be seen. In 48 hours, when the first shots were fired in what historians would call the Human Schism War, the galaxy would learn whether understanding humanity was enough to survive it.